Hey guys, this video wasn't easy to make. Some things on the internet should never feel this real. In Peru, there's a darker layer online. Real crimes, real damage, and once you notice it, there's no going back. Welcome to the dark side of Peru's internet. For years, a feeling circulated in Peru that was hard to explain but impossible to ignore. It wasn't just fear of crime, it was something deeper, more unsettling. The sense that there were people capable of doing anything and disappearing. People who didn't fear the police, borders, or the law. People who always seemed one step ahead. In North Lima, that fear had a name that almost no one dared to say out loud. An alias that appeared again and again in anonymous reports, in audio messages forwarded on WhatsApp, in messages that arrived at dawn from unknown numbers. El Monstruo. Okay, so I'm going to call him the Monster just because my Spanish sucks. His real name is Eric Luis Moreno Hernandez, and for years he was considered the most dangerous and most wanted criminal in the country. Not because of a single incident, not because of one specific crime, but because of something far more disturbing. The way he managed to build an empire of terror by combining violence, corruption, and impunity with the help of the digital world. The monster didn't need to be physically present to terrify. He didn't need to show up with a weapon or knock on a door. In North Lima, fear began in a much simpler way. A message on your phone, a short audio clip, a photo taken from the corner of your house. That was enough to understand that you were already marked. Eric Moreno was the leader of the criminal organization known as Los Injertos del Cono Norte, a gang dedicated to systematic extortion, contract killings, kidnappings, and territorial control. His business wasn't stealing, his business was fear, and the internet was his greatest ally. Drivers, shop owners, and small business owners lived under constant threats. The scheme was always the same. Pay or you die. Pay or we burn down your business. Pay or someone you love disappears. And those threats were not made face to face. They were made through calls, through voice notes, through encrypted messages. The monster understood something before many others did. The cell phone is an extension of fear. He knew what time you left your house. He knew which bus you took. He knew where your children went to school. And all that information reached you through a screen. Cold, impersonal, impossible to argue with. According to prosecutorial investigations, at least 12 murders were directly linked to orders from Eric Moreno. 12 confirmed deaths. But those who truly understood how these gangs operated knew that number was probably only part of something much larger. Over time, his name became synonymous with terror. In North Lima, receiving a message associated with his alias meant one thing only. There was no escape. Many paid without reporting it. Others reported it and later regretted it. Some simply never lived to tell their story. The magnitude of the problem forced the Peruvian state to react. The Ministry of the Interior offered a historic reward, nearly 1 million sols, around $300,000 for information leading to his capture. It was a clear signal. The monster had become a national priority. But when the police began to close in, Moreno did what he did best: disappear. His escape was not improvised. It was planned, cold, and meticulous. He crossed borders through clandestine routes, avoided immigration controls, and left behind the country he had filled with fear. Bolivia was one of his first refugees. Then Brazil, then Paraguay. Always on the move, always changing identities. Investigations revealed something disturbing. Moreno used fake passports bearing the real names of people from his own district. These were not randomly invented identities. They were carefully chosen to blend in. In the digital world, no one knew who he really was, and in real life, neither did anyone else. He also constantly changed phones, SIM cards, and email accounts. He avoided leaving traces. He deleted conversations. He discarded devices. For months, the internet was his hiding place. But not everything was luxury in his life as a fugitive. Far from North Lima, his power faded. He lived hidden in precarious rooms, sleeping on the floor, moving at night, avoiding routines. Even so, he was never alone. Every time the police got close, something happened. A message, a call, a warning that arrived before the operation. The monster didn't find out by chance. He found out because someone, somewhere, pressed send ahead of time. That invisible network of alerts and leaks allowed him to evade operations in more than one country. In Brazil, he was even linked to the death of a police officer, an accusation he would later deny. In Bolivia, he was close to being captured, and he was. In Santa Cruz de la Sierra, anti-drug agents managed to arrest him. The news spread across Peru in minutes. The most wanted criminal in the country had fallen, but the celebration was short-lived. 7 hours later, Eric Moreno was free. What happened during those 7 hours is one of the darkest episodes in this story. According to the testimony of his partner at the time, Bolivian police officers demanded money in exchange for letting him go. They moved him from one place to another while negotiating his freedom. There were no clear statements. There were no official records. But there were deleted calls, messages that were never saved, decisions made outside any formal system. The monster didn't escape by simply walking away. He escaped between turned-off screens and invisible conversations. The outrage was immediate. How was it possible that one of the most dangerous criminals in South America could be captured and released on the same day? No one gave clear explanations. No one took responsibility. And the monster kept running. After Bolivia, he understood that he had to be even more careful. He crossed into Paraguay, convinced he could disappear again. But this time, something changed. His support network was beginning to crack. In Peru, police had arrested relatives and close collaborators. The net was no longer just physical, it was digital, financial, and human. The final mistake was technological. Moreno reused a phone linked to an email account that was already under surveillance. A small slip, a minimal trace. For years, he had used the internet to hide. In the end, it was the internet that betrayed him. An anonymous tip did the rest. The location reached Paraguayan authorities, who decided to act differently. The operation in San Lorenzo was handled with absolute secrecy. Only a small group of high-ranking officials knew the exact information. They didn't even notify Peruvian police until the very last moment, fearing leaks. As evening fell, more than 50 agents surrounded the house. When they burst in, they found Eric Moreno calm, simply dressed, unaware that this time there would be no escape. He was subdued in seconds. Among his belongings, they found several carefully selected fake passports. As he was handcuffed, he asked a question that said it all. Who turned me in? Even then, he tried what he always did. He offered money. A lot of money, up to $1 million was mentioned, but this time it didn't work. No one accepted. His capture was a direct blow to transnational organized crime. The monster was transferred to a maximum security prison while extradition proceedings began. In Peru, the news was received with relief and with an uncomfortable question. How had he managed to escape so many times? Who helped him? Who looked the other way? The case opened a deep debate about the integrity of institutions. Lawmakers demanded that Moreno be interrogated before his extradition in order to identify possible accomplices within the state. The suspicion was clear. No one escapes that many times without inside help. Today, Eric Moreno awaits justice, but his story left an indelible mark. Because beyond the murders, the extortions, and the escapes, the monster exposed something far more disturbing. That true terror doesn't always come from a weapon. Sometimes it comes from a message, from a call, from a screen glowing in the middle of the night. Because in Peru, the darkest side of the internet isn't always on the deep web. Sometimes it's in the phone you carry in your pocket. On March 10th, 2017, in Magdalena del Mar, Lima, Peru, 19-year-old Luis Sergio Ramirez Santos said goodbye to his mother as he did every day and headed off to university. At 6 p.m., his mother received a message from him, which she thought would be to let her know he was already on his way home or that he was going out with friends. But when she opened it, her eyes couldn't believe what they were seeing. It was a terrifying photo of Luis unconscious on the floor with several extremely serious injuries on his body and surrounded by a large pool of blood. All of this after meeting a girl he had met on Tinder. Luis Sergio Ramirez Santos was 19 years old. He lived with his mother and his younger brother in the Lima district of Magdalena del Mar. He was a calm, reserved young man, dedicated to his university studies and passionate about music. He was single, so like many people his age, he used Tinder to meet girls. He wasn't looking for anything serious. He was simply open to talking and experiencing something momentary with someone who caught his attention. That's where he met Ana Lucia Carranza Chiara, a 21-year-old young woman, also a university student, who lived an apparently normal life but had a rather introverted and reserved personality. On Tinder, she usually presented herself as approachable and friendly, although she could also be reckless when someone interested her. After exchanging messages for several days, they realized that there really was chemistry between them, so they agreed to meet for the first time at the Hoki Plaza shopping mall. They walked around, ate ice cream, and enjoyed their time together. At the end of the day, before saying goodbye, Ana asked Luis to walk her home in San Juan de Lurigancho. When they arrived, she asked him if he wanted to come in. He accepted, and as expected, they had an intimate encounter. After that, Luis got up, told her he had to leave, and said goodbye as if nothing had happened, assuming he would never see her again. He had been very clear. He wasn't looking for a serious relationship. He simply wanted something casual, something that directly signed his sentence. For Ana Lucia, that encounter was very special. She had fallen deeply in love with Luis after just one day together. For several months, she insisted, telling him she wanted to see him and that she wanted a serious relationship with him. But Luis refused. He had been very clear from the beginning. Ana felt rejected, but she still had a goal in mind, to make Luis hers. Luis began to ignore her. He didn't reply to her messages, turned down invitations, and told her he didn't have time to see her. And so it went on for an entire year with her being completely rejected by Luis. But because she was so persistent, he finally agreed to have a second date with her. 12 months of begging someone to be with you must be one of the worst humiliations you can put yourself through. What's strange is that during that time, Ana Lucia met another guy, also on Tinder, Aníbal Augusto Chalco, and a relationship developed between them. Little by little, he became her confidant and emotional accomplice. He was the perfect guy, attentive, chivalrous, thoughtful, and completely in love with Ana, so he was capable of doing everything she asked of him. And when I say everything, it's not an exaggeration. He was literally capable of doing whatever it took to please her. On March 10, 2017, Luis arrived at Ana Lucia's house. For him, it was going to be an encounter like any other, spending some time together and then heading back to his home with his mother and brother. But he was completely wrong. Once he entered that house, he would never leave, or at least, not alive. When he walked through the door, Ana closed it behind him. She turned the music up to full volume and told him to follow her to the bedroom. Luis followed her. When he went in, he found Aníbal standing in front of him, the current boyfriend of the girl he thought he was meeting. Luis didn't understand who he was, what he was doing there, or why he was holding a sword in his hands. Suddenly, and without a word, Aníbal lunged at him and attacked him with the sword, severely cutting part of his right arm. The blow caught him off guard, and he fell to the floor as his arm began bleeding rapidly. At that moment, Ana Lucia began hitting and kicking him. She jumped on top of the poor young man, crushing his face, chest, and stomach, all while screaming at him and insulting him. Aníbal, meanwhile, continued making cuts all over his body with a sword. It was an abhorrent scene, like something out of a gore horror movie. Luis could barely move. His breathing was shallow and his strength faded with every passing minute. She wouldn't stop screaming at him, telling him to apologize for all the damage he had done to her. But Luis didn't respond, not out of indifference, but because he was too badly injured, beaten, and had lost too much blood. He didn't even have the strength to apologize or ask her to stop. Ana took this as indifference, and with every second that passed without Luis apologizing, her hatred for him grew even more. The violence did not stop. They tied him up with ropes, beat him, and prolonged his suffering, as if the goal were not only to end his life, but to do it slowly. While Luis agonized, Ana collected the blood he was losing in plastic containers. She was completely insane. She watched it with a strange fascination, as if she were contemplating something beautiful in the middle of the horror. She watched how it slowly coagulated, and that simple process seemed to hypnotize her. Curiosity pushed her even further. She put her hand into the containers and began to play with the blood, enjoying the feeling of it between her fingers and smearing herself with it. Ana Lucia and Aníbal were completely out of control, enjoying all the damage that they were inflicting on poor Luis. The sword cuts, the stomping, the blows, and the insults seemed more like entertainment mixed with rage than an act of revenge. Finally, in an act of absolute coldness, Ana Lucia sat on top of Luis's dying body, and while rubbing herself against him, she took a rope, placed it around his neck, and strangled him until she made sure he was no longer breathing. It was as if all of his suffering and death gave her pleasure. After ending his life, Ana Lucia and Aníbal moved on to the next step of their plan. Getting rid of the body. They didn't improvise. They had been planning everything for days. They took out blankets, sacks, and ropes they had bought the night before. They began wrapping him carefully, layer by layer, as if they were trying to erase any trace of what had happened. The objective was clear: to make it look like just another bundle, an insignificant piece of trash. Hours later, they loaded the body into a taxi, transported it, and abandoned it on the 2,400 block of Constellation Avenue in the center of San Juan de Lurigancho, in broad daylight, right in front of all the neighbors in the area without caring at all. The worst part is that Ana and Anibal were not finished. Before disposing of the body, they took photos of Luis lying on the floor, lifeless, surrounded by a pool of blood, and sent them directly to his mother's cell phone. The message came with a demand: 20,000 sols in exchange for her son's life, approximately $5,700. For the woman, opening those images was a nightmare, impossible to process. Seeing her son in that condition, when she thought he was calmly at university, worst of all, she still didn't know that he was already dead. They toyed with the desperate family's emotions, threatening them and making them believe that Luis's life could still be saved. The mother transferred 1,500 sols, about $400. It was all she had at that moment, and she thought it was the best way to try to calm them down and buy time to gather the remaining money to save her son. After receiving the transfer, Ana Lucia and Anibal went shopping at a mall as if nothing had happened, strolling around and showing the level of perversity and indifference they both had. But while they were enjoying the money, the police had already received the kidnapping report and a tip from neighbors on Constelacion Avenue about a strange bundle abandoned in the street. When police went to check it, they realized the full truth. It was Luis's body, with his hands and feet bound, wrapped in fabric and tape, his arms cut, his face destroyed, and signs of strangulation. By reviewing nearby security cameras and the taxi's route, they discovered everything. They saw Ana Lucia and Anibal leaving the body. They saw Luis entering Ana Lucia's house, but they never saw him leaving. When they searched Ana Lucia's house, they found everything else that sealed their fate: blankets, ropes, materials used to wrap the body, and clear traces that a crime had been committed. Ana Lucia and Anibal were immediately arrested and confessed everything in chilling detail, with a coldness that even frightened the police themselves. An atrocious, excessively bloody crime to have started with a Tinder date. After several trials in 2018, Ana Lucia and Anibal Chalco were sentenced to 25 years in prison. A few years later, Ana attempted to escape from prison and had to be transferred to a maximum security prison in Junín, where she remains to this day. What is most disturbing is that this is not the only case where a relationship that began on the internet led to chilling consequences. In June 2020, in the middle of the pandemic, a single Facebook message was enough to capture the attention of several girls between the ages of 12 and 14. What seemed like a simple virtual game turned into a world of absurd rules and threats, all thanks to one of the most disturbing predators in Peru. In 2020, when the pandemic kept all of us locked inside our homes, social media became the place where many adolescents spent most of their time. Among them were girls aged 12 to 14, looking for distractions in chats and new virtual friendships. That's when a supposed boy appeared. Kind, attentive, affectionate, and eager to be the virtual boyfriend of many of those girls in Peru. At first, for these teenagers, everything was going great. They had met the perfect boy, and for many of them, it was the closest they had ever come to having a real romance. They talked about what they would do when they met, about getting ice cream together and going to the movies. Typical conversations of teenagers in love. But little by little, that bond turned into something much stranger and more disturbing. As if they were strategic, psychological moves of manipulation, this boy began imposing small rules that became more radical over time. The girls were required to talk only to him. They were not allowed to have male friends. They had to respond immediately. And above all, they had to keep their relationship a secret. At first, the girls who were in love went along with it. They were very innocent and didn't see anything strange. Later, to build trust, he demanded details of their private lives, their social media passwords, erotic conversations, and even intimate photos once a week. I repeat, intimate photos from innocent girls. Girls aged 12, 13, and 14. And this wasn't even the worst part. With each passing day, he became more aggressive and demanding. If any of them tried to cut off communication, he threatened to reveal what he already knew about them, publish the intimate photos, or send them directly to their families. Following the aberrant rules and continuing in that toxic relationship was the only way to avoid it, to avoid problems. The craziest part of all is that despite the pandemic restrictions, his encounters didn't remain purely virtual. He managed to meet several girls in person, and after blackmailing and manipulating them, he abused them without any kind of remorse. That's when they realized it wasn't just a toxic teenager, but an adult man. a 29-year-old. Imagine what those poor girls went through. At 12 or 13 years old, you don't understand how cruel the world can be, and you're faced with a degenerate who, through manipulation and control, manages to blackmail you into meeting him and using you in a ruthless way. Over time, several parents began to notice changes in their daughters: fearful behavior, excessive silence, or sudden anxiety when receiving messages on their phones. That's when the first reports appeared, and they all pointed to the same thing: a profile posing as a teenager who became a boyfriend, established a set of absurd rules, and then used intimidation to keep them trapped and managed to accuse them. Obviously, the police realized these were not isolated cases, but a serial predator who used the internet in Peru as his main tool. One of the families who reported the incident said that their 13-year-old daughter had arranged to meet this alleged teenager. The agents decided to set up an undercover operation to find and identify him. Keeping their distance, they followed the girl to a hotel in Lima, where this man had told the girl to meet him, and that's where they saw him, a man in his late 20s, greeting the young victim, approaching her like a lion stalking its prey. At that moment, the police intervened, captured him, and finally revealed the identity of the child predator: Cristian Alva Vicente, 29 years old, a man, a guy, an old man, who only cared about assaulting. When they arrested him, they realized that it was not the first time that this degenerate had committed this type of crime. He had several complaints against him for harassment, abuse, and, in other words, the guy had been abusing girls for years and had never been caught until then. In the end, he was found guilty of several counts of blackmail and extortion and child abuse, for which he was sentenced to 24 years in prison. Even though that's quite a long time, I still think it's too short for a degenerate like him. Leave your comments below. The comment with the most likes will be featured in the next video. Thanks for everything, and see you next time.